Okay, so in today's video I'm going to explain to you how to translate some of the sentences from lesson 28. So if you're following along in your textbook, we're looking at lesson 28 sentences 1 through 5. That's page 192 and 193 in your textbook. So let's do these together. Now I do encourage you to try to translate these on your own first. If you haven't done that already, I'd just stop the video, work through these translations as best you can, and then watch the video to kind of see if you got them right and if you could fix them in any way or do them better. So I'm assuming you've already looked at these. Okay, that's information I'm going to pull up later. So ha de oiketes apokrinato upo oida eth hokurias gerai tini timethesetai eta tautes tais times hamartesetai. Okay, so nice and easy. We have ha oiketes right at the beginning, so the servant is our subject. The servant. And then we have the word apokrinato, which comes from apokrinomai, which means to reply in discourse or answer. If it's a question, but we don't really know from the context what's going on. So the servant replied, and then we have a capital letter here, so we know this is the beginning of a quotation mark. Oida, which means I know, that's one of your new vocab words. Upo, that means not yet. So you want to say I do not yet know. Atha, whether, and atha always gets followed by another atha. Here it is in the form eta, same word. It doesn't just turns into a theta because there's a rough breathing mark following it. So here we have upo oida eighth, so I do not yet know whether. And then we have hakurios, which means the master, right? This is a new vocab word for you. Kurios means having authority, but it's used here as a substantive. That means as a noun in its own right. So it's an adjective most basically, but when it's ha kurios by itself, it's a noun, so it's the master or the one having authority. So I do not yet know whether the master, and then here's our main verb that corresponds to the subject of this clause, which is ha kurios, timethesetai. So here's a new ending that you now know. Thesetai is a future passive. So we'll translate timao, which means to honor, in the passive, so to be honored, and then in the future, will be honored. I do not yet know whether the master will be honored. And then we have two datives here standing alone without a definite article. Tini means some or a. It can be used as an indefinite article like a or some or a certain. And then gerai here means prize. So I do not know whether the master will be honored by a prize or with a prize maybe. And then so we have eta, so or whether hamartesetai, he will miss out on, and then tautes times, that honor, namely the honor of having a prize. So just to recap, we have two futures here. We have a future that is not passive but a middle because there's no theta, and then we have a future passive because you have an eta here. Notice that other than that, sorry, not an eta, a theta. Notice that other than that theta, these endings are identical. So this is the middle future, and this is the, sorry, I should say future middle. And then here you have future passive. So keep in mind that the middle and the passive split endings in the future tense. Okay, so I think that's that sentence. Now you might have been confused by this word here, gerai, because it looks like a nominative plural feminine noun, but it is not. And I've copied it out here. I'm just going to pull it up. for you to look at. So gerai comes from, it is the dative singular of the word geras. If you want to go over this, you can look at page 102 in your textbook, because this is an odd declension from an alpha sigma stem, a neuter noun in the third declension, and keep in mind the sigma stem neuter nouns are the weirdest. I'll look at another one later in this lesson and in this video. But for now, you can just review it quickly here. So you have the nominative singular geras, and then the genitive singular geros, which looks very weird. It actually looks almost like a participle, but you just have to know that that could be a genitive singular in the alpha sigma stem. Then here you have it, the dative gerai. You might also see it with an alpha iota subscript, and that will tell you a bit more, right? Because that actually looks like a dative singular that you already know in the feminine. And then the accusative singular is geras. And then, of course, because it's a neuter, you'll have the identical nominative and accusative. Same in the plural, so gera. And that looks like your basic neuter plural ending, just a plain old alpha. Then you have geron, which is that omega nu ending is common throughout in the genitive plural. Then you have gerasin, and then you have gera, reduplication of your neuter plural ending in your accusative plural ending. So if you want to review that, this is a good time to go back to page 102, and you can look at that noun and look at some of the other nouns there as well in that lesson. You'll have the most odd endings in that lesson. I believe that's lesson 17 in your textbook, but either way the page is 102. Okay, so that's that sentence, sentence 1. Let's look at sentence 2. Dia tuto pistu these huphemon hoti upothemas su beblafas ethelon. This is a pretty tricky sentence, but let's just walk through it step by step. So because of this, or on account of this, pistu these, so we have a new vocab word and a new ending here. Pistuo means to believe in or to have trust in. Here you have a future passive of pistuo, so you will be trusted, huphemon, by us. So I'll just say because of this, and we don't know exactly what that refers to yet. Sorry, I'm complicating this. Because of this, you'll be trusted by us, since, you can also translate this as namely, since it is spelling out the hoti here, spells out what dia tuto means. It's a weird way in Greek. You see this all the time. I see Aristotle do it every time I translate a paragraph of Aristotle. It's sort of a weird way of saying, because of this, you'll be trusted by us, namely, since, and that's referring to the dia tuto. So it's not referring to something that was said before, it's now referring to something that comes after the hoti. So in English, we would normally put the reason first and then say, therefore, you will be trusted by us. But in Greek, they do it the other way around, often as not. So let's translate the rest of it. So hoti is since or namely, and then we have to look for our subject here, and it's a little bit confusing. Su is our subject, our nominative here, and then we have beblafas and ethelon, and both of these look like verbs, but only one of them is a verb, and it's beblafas. And beblafas means you have harmed. That's how you literally translate beblafas. Now, what's going on here? We have a couple of things we need to fill out to get the sense here. So upoth is a new word, upate, which means never. So we can put you have never harmed, and then hemas is our direct object. That's in the accusative, so you have never harmed us. And then we have participle here, ethelon, which means just willing. But you have to ask yourself, when you see a participle floating like this, what it's referring to. So if it's not governed by a definite article, most likely it's governing the verb it's going with. So ethelo we'll be going with Beblophos. You also can look at the ending and tell which noun in the sentence it's going with. So since it's nominative, it's going with Sue Beblophos. So it's explaining the circumstances. We can call this a circumstantial participle, and it almost behaves like an adverb. In fact, I'm going to suggest you should translate it like an adverb. So, you have never harmed us willingly. That's how that should go. So you could most basically translate it: you willingly, or sorry, you under the pretense of willing, never harmed us. So you never harmed us willingly. So that's why you will be trusted by us in the future. So that's how you translate that sentence. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing. I get that this Beblophos ethalon is sort of confusing, but hopefully by seeing how I did it, you can sort of repeat that sort of thing in the future. Okay, let's go to sentence 3, which is a perfectly lovely sentence. So, pou entoi cosmoi egenethes, anaxiae, klops, kai ti kakon zoon se egenesen. So pou is just where. Entoi cosmoi is in the world. Where in the world? Now we have egenethes, which is a new vocab word for you. So it comes from, let me spell it out for you. It comes from your new vocab, genao. And I'll just quickly point out the first couple of principal parts here. And it's so the second principal part is geneso, future, and then the third principal part is egenesa. And then I'll do the sixth principal part, which you'll need to sort of understand what's going on here, and you'll have again Nathan. Sorry, it takes me a long time to type in Greek. Okay, so this means to give birth, to bear, to beget. These are the translations in your textbook. What you have here is a aorist passive. So where in the world were you born is how you should translate that. Not to give or birth, to give birth, to bear, to beget. What might be confusing is that your textbook doesn't tell you that passive is to be born, right? Which makes sense, but it doesn't obviously come out of these sample translations you get in your textbook. So, where in the world were you born, you unworthy or you worthless thief? And now we have another clause with the same verb, but notice that it's not the same principal part even. So this says, and T, what, kakon, evil, zoon is an animal. What evil animal, egenesen? And this, you just have your basic aorist with the sigma, epsilon nu, third person singular. What evil animal begot or gave birth to you? Se. I don't know. I don't know what the author of this sentence is thinking here, or who this unworthy thief is, if they're a mythical creature. You might want to say, because zoon doesn't have to be an animal here, it might not be that bad. You could say like foul creature, which is nice and poetic. I don't know. Probably creature is a better translation than animal here, because presumably this is a human thief. But I mean, it does say animal. A zoon is an animal. You could translate it as creature. But that's a nice, fun sentence. So where in the world were you born, O worthless thief, and what evil creature gave birth to you? So that's sentence 3, relatively straightforward. Thing to look out for here is you have sixth principal part, third principal part, aorist passive, aorist active. Okay. Sentence 4. R. Upoth hexamen again, eudaimon bion aneu hamartion o Socrates, question mark. We know it's a question already with R here. This introduces a question. So, hexamen will we, and then upoth is never, so will we never, and then echo plus an infinitive does not mean to have, but mean to be able to. Will we never be able to, so that's translating hexamen, which is the future of echo, which with an infinitive means to be able to do something. Will we ever be able to lead beyond eudaimona means lead a happy life. Aneu, without. And then you have hamartion in the plural, something like mistakes. And then O Socrates, which I'll just throw at the beginning. Socrates, will we never be able to lead a happy life without mistakes? Fairly straightforward. The thing to look out for here is echo plus an infinitive verb means to be able to. We have a future of echo, which is kind of weird because you get a rough breathing mark instead of a smooth breathing mark, but that doesn't change anything. It just is echo in the future. Okay, now to our final sentence. Kai per ta alethe, you idotes, upo auta panta, agalumen tois polois hata mega phobethesomenois. That's a great word to say. Phobethesomenois. Okay, so at this point, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain how you should start to look at a sentence like this, because there's no obvious subject or obvious verbs right at the beginning. Now, I will point out to you that the main verb is, of course, right here, agalumen, but it's slightly irregular, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. Let me just translate it as literally as possible in the order it comes in. Okay, so kai per is although. And then you have idotes, which is a new word. It comes from oida. If you look on page 191 in your textbook, you'll see that eidos is the participle form of oida. And so we know that this is a participle here for knowing, although knowing. And in fact, it is the masculine plural nominative of eidos, which is the participle for knowing. And of course, it looks like a perfect participle because it sort of is, but it gets translated as present. So, although knowing, which is an adverb meaning well. So, although knowing well, ta alethe, the true things. So, although knowing the true things well, this is hyperliteral. Now, again, I'm going to point this out. This is a third declension neuter noun. I think I have it here, yeah. Let me just pull it up. I'll push this aside. Sorry, bear with me. So, we have ta alethe here, and it looks weird. Now, it's nice that you have the definite article here, because that's going to tell you that it is actually an accusative, or nominative, but here accusative, plural, of the true things. Even though the eta ending here looks like a feminine singular. You can review this. This is an accusative neuter plural, or I should say or nominative. And you can find it in your textbook on page 103. I highly recommend that you kind of go back and write this one out a couple times, just so you kind of, I don't know, you can sort of bear with it when you see it next time. And just to go over it, so your nominative singular is alethes, which is, again, highly irregular. Alethus in the genitive, alethe in the dative. Well, that looks pretty familiar. and then alethes in the accusative, which reduplicates the nominative into neuter noun. Then you have alethe, neuter plural nominative, alethone. Thankfully, you always have an omega nu in the genitive plural. Then you have alethesin, and then alethe, which is again a reduplication. This is the form it is in right here, accusative plural. So although knowing the true things well, I'm just going to get rid of this now. That's the first clause. It's a participle clause. It's a dependent clause on the rest of the sentence. Now we have the word upo, which is a new word you learn, which means not yet. And then we have auta panta, which I'm just going to translate as all these for now. And then we have agelumen, which comes from agelo, or angelo, and it means to announce. And it's also in the first person plural, so we announce. And you might not notice this right away, but it is in the future. And I'll explain to you why in a second. So, although knowing the true things well, we will not yet announce all these, i.e. the true things, tois polos, to the masses, to the people, to the many. Hoi polloi means masses. Tois pollois is just the dative of the same thing. You could also just translate this to the people, which is sort of an over-translation, but it gets the sense of what is going on here. Clearly this is a ruler or set of rulers speaking. They know what's going on, but they will not yet announce all these things to the people. Hate, because mega here is an adverb. Greatly, we'll just do that for a second. Here's a great word. So I already said this one, phobethesomenois. And it is a future passive. So phobeo, let me actually just pull this up here for a second. I kind of... So it comes from phobeo, of course, right? Phobethesomenois. And it's a future passive participle. How do we know that? Well, we have the theta, eta, sigma, and that's going to tell you it's future passive. That's, if you look at all the new endings in your lesson for lesson 28, they have a theta, eta, sigma. So future passive, theta, sigma, usually an eta in between. And then you have this menois ending, which is just a passive participle ending, right? That men morpheme tells you it's a passive participle. Okay. Now, phobeo in the active means to frighten or to scare, i.e. someone else, right? But in the passive, it means to be frightened or to be scared. So if this is going to be a future passive participle, we'll want to translate it going to be frightened. I think what we could probably do here is we will not yet announce all these things, i.e. the true things, to the people because they are going to be frightened greatly. That's probably the most literal way to translate that. They are going to be frightened greatly. And don't be afraid or be worried that you're translating the participle as a noun. They are going to be frightened greatly. Don't be afraid to do that. That's how they work. That's how participles work in Greek. We use verbs in most cases where Greeks use participles. So we're going to translate participles as verbs quite often. Okay, let me just double check that I got everything here. Although knowing the true things well, we will not yet announce all these, i.e. the true things, to the people because they are going to be frightened greatly. I'm not going to make a coronavirus reference here, but you can sort of make up one on your own. Okay, now I said I'd talk about Angelo for a second. Futures always, sorry, not always, often as not, have sigmas in them, right? That's what tells you that a verb is a future. So I'm looking at this verb here, agelumen. You would think it should say agelesomen or agelsomen to be in the future for we will announce, but it doesn't do that. What happens is when you have a double lambda, strange things happen. The first thing is the lambda drops out, and then it adds. It sort of acts all of a sudden now as if it's a contract verb, and then you get o, and then of course when you have omen, it looks like angeleomen. And then what happens here is when you have an epsilon plus an omega, you get omicron upsilon. So agelumen. No sigma. So if you want to see, or if you want to refresh your memory on why that happens, you can look at why this happens to ballo. This is the first verb we learned that this happened to. You can look at page 90 and 91 of your textbook, and you can just, it'd be a good idea, I think, for everybody just to review that, just so you can kind of remember that next time you see angelumen in a sentence, or ballo, or balumen in a sentence, just so you know that the futures sometimes don't have sigmas, but what you'll often see is a slight changing of the ending, which you do see here, and it looks like a contract verb ending, and it kind of is a contract verb ending. So go ahead and review that on page 90 and 91. Look at ballo, and while you're at it, just kind of refresh your memory on what some of the contract verbs look like. I think that's chapter 15 or lesson 15. Either way, it's right before the pages of 90 and 91. Good idea to go over those just to kind of get them fresh in your head. At this point in your Greek game, a lot of what you're going to have to do is just go back and look at some of the vocab and some of the grammar when you see it in a sentence. I'm still doing this as I do Greek. Sometimes I come across a construction that I haven't seen in a while. It's just, you just don't see it right away. It's a good idea then to go back and to look at it and just to go over your endings. Human brains don't memorize things for no reason. So when you have a reason, like when you're trying to translate a sentence and make meaning of words, then you'll be able to memorize this stuff a lot better. So when you go back and you're like, yeah, I was struggling over angelumen, and then you actually went back and looked at all the endings for ballo, it's going to stick a lot more than the first time you just looked at those endings for ballo, right? Because you just go over it, you're like, oh, this is meaningless. But now when you get stuck in a verb, take the time to go over the reasons why it does what it does if you're confused by it. So for this one, go look at page 90 to 91. That's it for sentences 1 through 5. You have to translate sentences 6 through 10 for your final assignment and submit that on Blackboard. So good luck with that. As always, email me if you have any questions.